Well, so much is going on the foreign scene, and I'm not talking India, at least not yet. It's a debate around vaccine patent. Now, you know how you invent something and get it protected by patenting or trademarking it just to prevent copying and to also ensure that you benefit financially from your work? Well, that applies to vaccines as well. And there's a major spat brewing between big pharmaceuticals that have developed COVID-19 vaccines and countries that are calling for a temporary lifting of intellectual property rights so it can be cheaper and more accessible in this pandemic period. So much questions. How does this work? What lies ahead? And so much more. Well, let's join Dr. Gabrielle Macaulay, who's the medical director of MAHA. She joins us from the UK. Thank you for being a part of the program. Let's begin with a debate around vaccine patents. Well, the US is asking vaccine manufacturing be liberalized, so to speak, so that poorer countries can produce in-country to meet their demands. And I'm just wondering, is this a no-brainer, or there's more to this, at least from the medical perspective?
Yeah, I don't think it's a no-brainer. I think it's a very important and a very good question, because removing patents is not going to solve the problem that we have. There are still many bottlenecks that need to be addressed. So, for example, there's a lot of problems with free trade. It's not so easy for people to trade vaccines or send vaccines from one country to another. There's also issues with scarcity of very important ingredients that are used to create the vaccines, and then also an unwillingness for richer countries to share vaccines with poorer countries. So these are things that need to be thought about. And if we're able to get rid of patents and just have generic vaccines, we have to make sure that vaccine efficacy is not compromised and make sure that vaccine safety is not compromised. So we have to share information on how we're going to make the vaccines easily accessible for all. No one is safe until everybody is safe. And it's really a tragedy that only 0.3% of the COVID vaccines in the world have been given to the poorer countries. And only 1% of people in poorer countries have been vaccinated, as opposed to much higher percentages in the UK, in America, and in Israel. So in the UK, we're at 52%.
You know, critics of this waiver plans say that producing COVID-19 vaccines is complex, just as you referenced, and setting up production at new facilities might compromise the quality of the vaccines and even stifle innovation. Now, let me latch onto that last point, because stifling innovation also talks about financial reward, definitely. So do you think that people sometimes expect too much from those in the health industry, forgetting that it's business for them too?
Well, all of these pharmaceutical companies, they are businesses, they have shareholders. So companies like Pfizer, Pfizer-BioNTech, and also Pfizer and Moderna, they are selling the vaccines at over $30 per vaccine. Whereas companies like AstraZeneca, they are selling the vaccine at cost price, so it's a lot cheaper. You have to remember that pharmaceuticals have to have incentives to be able to put masses and masses of money into the investment into vaccines. And we don't want to put these companies off from, doing all this groundbreaking work in the future. So it's really a balancing act in terms of thinking about price of making these vaccines and also selling them.
So clearly you think this is going to be a tricky one. But you know what also bothers me is that debate on this at the WTO, where, most of the decision will be taken between member countries. This debate might take months. Months. And you've seen the fatality rates across countries, the infection rates. And if these talks take months, I wonder just how many lives or how many infections will have been recorded. You would expect that for something this crucial, it will take very little time to be debated. Does that also worry you?
So the bottom line is that we don't have months and years to come up with these decisions. We have to make sure that the bottlenecks that I mentioned before are eradicated. So this is trade bottlenecks, this is not sharing of vaccines, and this is also scarcity of ingredients. We have to make sure that there is enough ingredients and that we can ramp up the scale of production. And we have to make sure that those who are the most vulnerable are not left behind, and that we can increase the vaccination rates in the poorer countries. 1% of vaccination rates in poorer countries compared to 52% in the UK, it's just not good enough. We have to make sure that everyone is vaccinated and that everyone is safe if we're all going to be safe.
Well, let's round off on this note. Let's head over to India. I know you worked there briefly and you've seen the health system. So maybe you understand why this is happening in India. There are fears that there might be another India. In fact, Nepal is pretty scared, thinking we might be next. How do we stop another India from happening?
I think it's really, really difficult to stop the spread of COVID once levels hit a certain rate. So, for example, the UK found it very difficult to control cases, but the UK is a very privileged country. So to be able to lock down completely is a privilege. To be able to have running water to wash our hands, alcohol gel to clean our hands, these are all privileges. To be able to have really good healthcare is a privilege. And for a lot of people to be able to work at home from the comfort of their living rooms with their laptops and having internet is a privilege. Now, in countries like India and Nepal, a lot of people do not have this privilege. So to kind of use the same tactics to lock down completely when families have to feed their children, it's just not an option for a lot of people. So it's going to be very, very difficult.
Oh dear. Well, Dr. Gabrielle Macaulay, the MD of MAHA, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.